There was a report that came out today from Jeff Passan, our good friend of the show, Jeff Passan. And I don't know if people were expecting this. We obviously talked about Cedric Mullins potentially, the Phillies having interest in him. But Jeff Passan saying that Baltimore is willing to discuss trades for both Ryan Mountcastle and Cedric Mullins. Guys, reactions to that? Because obviously we talked about the Mullins thing yesterday, but to add Mountie into that conversation, I guess, Ryan, starting with you, what does that mean, and how likely is it that they move off of one or even both of those guys?
So this is the question that you're going to have with your team and where the Orioles are at. If you're trading a veteran player, is it an upgrade for an arm? And if that's the case, that makes sense. If it's not, I don't think it's a right move to trade those guys and stockpile more prospects. Does that make sense? Like, if you're going to trade one of those guys, you're hoping you're having a piece in place for beyond just this year. So I want to just point that out. I think that that's something that needs to be said. Now, having said that, if a team makes the right price, but I think that those veterans, I don't think there's anyone else that should play center field besides Cedric. You can talk about his struggles all you want. I think he's shown good moments. There's other things that he's had to deal with on other levels, but overall, he's solidified himself there. Currently, honestly, guys, if you move Mountie, you only move Mountie to bring Kobe Mayo up.
Yeah.
That is the one move. And I still think Mountie is so underrated. I don't like that people are quick to throw Mountie out here. I don't like that. But that's the move that would have to happen. There's no reason to trade Mountie unless you're bringing Kobe Mayo up to play consistently. That's that. The other name what I was going to say with this, I honestly think the more appealing player, and we could save it for a different time, Hayes is interesting to me because I think Hayes is still very good. And I think teams around baseball know that. You have a guy that was hurt, sick, didn't get off on the right foot, and yet he's still now hitting 248. And I know you might say, well, see how he started. He looks so much better than he did, and he's platooning right now. So I think teams would call and ask about, like, hey, what's Austin Hayes' availability? Because he's 28, I believe, and he's averaged 18 jacks and 30 doubles a season the last 3 years. A lot of teams are going to say, I want someone to start for my team. So that's where I go with that, Kev. I know we have a couple things. I don't know if you guys saw in the chat. We can, or in the what I just sent you guys.
Yeah. Well, I think even one more thing, just quickly here, Ryan, before we move into that, with and Zach, also want to get what you have to say on it too. But we talked about it with Seti yesterday, and just like the Phillies' interest. This has to be like a we help you, you help us type deal. They cannot move off one of these guys for prospects. That would be the worst, because that to me is like replenishing the farm system for what? The farm system doesn't need replenishing, first of all. This has to be an arm upgrade. I 100% agree. And I know, again, people will put together the pieces with like the Mariners and how they have so many pitchers, and could they use a Mountie or could they use somebody? I know the Phillies, and there was, what other team am I thinking of? What's the Astros? Am I wrong? Am I hearing stuff about the Astros maybe interested in one of those guys? I don't know. But to me, this has to be like, if you have the opportunity to upgrade, you do have options like a Mayo, other guys you can give playing time to. And if it doesn't happen this deadline, guys, I wouldn't be shocked if we're revisiting this conversation in the offseason as the Orioles try to upgrade their pitching staff, because we don't know about Bradish, we don't know about Means, we don't know about Corbin. So it's tough, because like you would love to see those guys stay for the stretch run, especially if they can just continue to be the guys that we know they can be. But if there's a clear upgrade out there and that's the deal breaker for a team, you're going to have to seriously consider it if you're the Orioles. But Zach, what do you have on it?
I mean, the one that makes most sense to me, like we just said, I'll do it, Kevin.
Okay.
Appreciate it. The one that makes most sense to me, kind of what you said, would be Hayes or Mountcastle, just because you have guys that you could plug in there. If it is for Mountcastle, you do have Kobe Mayo. You obviously have Ryan O'Hearn versus righties. Hell, we've seen Santander play first. We've seen them give a lot of options at first base. And then with Austin Hayes, obviously you have guys like Hauser. Norby can play the outfield if you want to keep him past the deadline. I think there's a lot more depth in the outfield in that first base. If you're getting rid of Cedric, you're making Hauser the everyday center fielder. I mean, that's the only way you can go about it. I don't really see anyone else. Maybe if Austin Hayes stays, he gets time in center field, but for the most part, it would be Hauser in center field if Mullins is gone. And I know I love his fielding, but even the difference between Mullins and Hauser is a massive difference fielding just because of how much range Mullins covers out there. And let's be honest, right now, they're both hitting pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, agree. And I see a lot of people are talking about it here. Just during the offseason, it makes more sense. I mean, I could look for the right player. The Orioles are trying to their timeline is big, even without, assuming everything goes right. You can never predict it, but assuming everything goes well and continues on the path, they're gonna have a long window. But they're also trying to win this year. You can't skimp out on this year just because you can maybe trade this guy in the offseason. No, if there's an arm that comes about and it's the perfect piece that can slot in there, you have to evaluate that if you're the Orioles and say, is that worth a Mountcastle? Is that worth a Mullins, a Hayes, whoever it may be? Because, and I said this on yesterday's show too, guys, that I do think next year is going to be a bit of a youth movement for the Orioles, where they're going to call up or give younger guys more everyday roles. And while it's not going to be every single position is going to be a young guy, they do have some other decisions to make, particularly on Tony and some other guys as well, where we're going to have to figure out like what this team looks like, but we're not there yet. We're trying to figure out what this team looks like for the stretch run this year. We know they need pitching this year. And if there's a controllable arm out there, obviously that helps you for the future as well. And, the conversations about Mountie and Seti and all those guys is like, if another team says we have an arm that can help you out, we need a bat, and we prefer one of those guys, it makes sense as a 1-for-1 or close to it swap, because we know the Orioles they desperately need pitching right now.
Yeah. And this is last thing I'll say with this is, first off, take a deep breath. all is going to work itself out, and always feels worse in the moment. Yes, when you look at other teams, two things happen if you make a run in the postseason. One, you're going to have three things. Let's go. One, you're going to have pitching step up, whoever that's going to be. But specifically, you have a better job when you have the right pieces, right? Whether it's saying having aces, multiple, plural, or that you have guys that are pitching at a high caliber level, right? Second thing is you're going to have timely clutch hits, and it's going to have to come from someone that you don't expect it to be. Typically, veterans have come up in those moments in the postseason. Why? Just being there before. So it's a young team. So when you take away veterans, it's just something I want to mention. And the last thing is you just got to hope that everything's clicking at the right time and you're not so banged up. It really is true with that. Because if you look at, just go back to in the past here, the Washington Nationals, when they went back and won, they were really struggling. But they got to the postseason, and then their starting pitching aligned. Their lineup was all right? Not crazy, but they had timely hitting. Howie Kendrick, the veteran, was the guy that came up in such big moments, and then their pitching took care of itself. Yes, they had Scherzer, and Strasburg had one of the best runs we've seen in a postseason, right? So you're going to need that. But it's just a context here. Howie Kendrick, for me, still is that unsung hero from that team. And I think that that's just a combination that you got to talk about as you move forward. But for the Orioles, when you're looking around, the team that scares me the most in the American League is the Houston Astros, because they have both. They have talent and they have experience. That's why they've been good for the last 10 years. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be good.